Oh, this new room is excellent.
It's feeling good, yeah. It's feeling pretty good. Finally...
Doug putting the work in.
Yeah, well, putting the work in. Also, big thanks to Jeffy B. We hate you. We despise you, you billionaire bastard. But
Jeffy B.
But these curtains and hangers and stuff like that are pretty good. And these lights as well.
Good $10 spent.
Yeah, mate. Yeah.
No delivery fee, nothing. Amazon Prime.
Yeah. I'm on the Prime. Yeah. We're all on the teat of the Jeffy B. I don't love it, but you know.
There was we
live in a society, Tim.
Just to get so nerdy straight away. There's a comic that's just been released, and obviously, you know, in comic books and in comic book movies, there's all the multiverse stuff that's going on. They just revealed that there's a universe out there where Jeff Bezos is one of the multiversal Lex Luthors. Like,
yeah. Oh, the dude is a straight up supervillain.
Yeah.
Like we know.
Yeah.
It's happening in real life, and we're just allowing it.
Yeah.
Okay, look, let's cut to it. I think what we've come to is we might already be shaking up the formula a little bit. Last week we did the Phil Collins episode where we just kind of talked about the icon of super producer, you know,
all-round celebrity and singer, composer, all of that stuff.
So we've been doing the two band sort of thing, like you bring a band, I bring a band, but we do want to dig in on certain things a little bit more. So I think this week we're going to just sort of pick the one artist and dig in on that and talk around that and see how that goes. So if you don't like that, rage at us in the comments.
But also, I just want to say a big thank you to like people that have actually been like making suggestions to us and things to talk about and that sort of stuff. Like I definitely want to talk about. There was one that got raised that was about like the rise of Amyl and the Sniffers.
Yeah,
and while that's not a band that I'm like a massive fan of, I absolutely respect the rise of that band and what they're doing. It's just not necessarily a genre for me, but I love to talk about what is going on with that band. And
as much as the MO of this show is to help other people discover music, getting suggestions about bands that we're not already listening to means that we get to discover music as well.
For sure.
And then we get to give our take on it from a fresh set of ears as well. So like there's a bunch of different facets to what we're doing at the moment.
And I think probably
it's, you know, there's plenty of people can do what we're doing, but I mean, like, you're listening, so
I think what is a perfect segue into today's topic is that I love the concept of that band.
Yeah.
And so it brings into focus today what we want to talk about, which is the concept album or the concept band.
Yeah.
And we're off to Monolith Festival this afternoon together. We're going to go and watch a whole bunch of bands at Monolith Festival, and Coheed and Cambria is the headliner of that festival.
Yeah, so we're in Brisbane, so this will come out on Thursday, so that would have been just the Saturday just gone.
Yeah.
And yeah, super excited. It's going to be this, you know what, like controversially, I wasn't a fan of the Good Things lineup. I think I might have already brought that up on here. I was not a huge fan of how broad they went with it. It's a big day. It's a proper size festival, but they've gone very broad and changed the MO of the festival for me. I'm really excited for Monolith because it is less bands, but they're all in the same ballpark, and I think that might be where the music industry has to go.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're seeing the dip of the broad genre, big day out style, something for everyone type lineup. I think that's what has been the thing that is not selling tickets, and I think that the focused genre niches are where it's sort of really powering along at the moment.
I think today we've got what's the first band there? Silverfang?
Silverfang, yep.
Silverfang. There's
Novelists,
Monuments, Leprous.
Monuments?
Is it Monuments?
Intervals.
I'm bad with these one name bands. Yeah. I'm really bad.
I was like, Monuments are there? I didn't think so.
Intervals, Leprous, Periphery, and then Coheed.
Yep.
And so Coheed are the topic of today, basically. Coheed playing, it was at Welcome Apollo. No, not Welcome Apollo. It's Good Apollo, I think. The one that has Welcome Home on it, and The Suffering, and I think it's Mother May I, and it's the album.
The album, yeah.
From like 15 years ago that everyone that isn't a Coheed fan strictly would have heard Welcome Home.
Yeah, 100%.
Which I think ties in really well with what we're doing. Is like, if you're maybe not a Coheed fan, but you were around at the time when that was new, that's 15 years ago, it's a nostalgia bait, this set list.
For sure.
But they still put out great music, and also the fact that they're such a high concept band is what we want to talk about today. Is like how so many bands they put out these concept albums and they hit, but they don't always hit because of the concept. Sometimes it's just the singles are great and people like them, but when you get to dig in on these bands, there's more than people are really going after.
Yeah, I obviously I want to contribute to suggesting a few of those great concept albums or whatever as well. But I also want to bring in my sort of knowledge of fandom and that sort of stuff as well around, because obviously there is the comic book element of Coheed and Cambria, and that there's an ongoing storyline.
Do you like comic books?
Shit. Of the Amory Wars that is ongoing across every record. So it's a new chapter every album, essentially.
Right.
I want to kind of dig down into that. And I think the two equate. When you have concept albums or concept bands, the same level of fandom exists for something like that does for comic books, that does for Netflix series, that does for movie series, that does for things like that. Well, it digs down, it scratches that same nerdy itch, I think.
Something we were talking about earlier was Closure in Moscow as an example.
Yes.
So I think First Temple was a concept album, wasn't it?
I don't know the concept of it, but it was certainly, it all felt very thematic.
Yeah,
that album.
Heavily thematic. And the idea that, so like, you're very into actual comic books. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of nerdy stuff that I like as well, but you're definitely someone who will dig in and read comic books, but also like get deep into like the lore of things and things inside out.
Yeah.
I am slightly different. I can be like really, I can really dig into certain things, but like with Coheed, for example, I don't know really anything about the comic books other than there are comic books.
Yeah.
So I'm more of like a casual fan, you could say, because I respect that there's themes there, and I know that that's what makes the music interesting. But for me, I probably will never go and read those comic books. And what we were talking about with with Closure, was that when the new Closure came out, I didn't really connect with their new music. They've brought new music out since, and I haven't gone and pursued it because I've lost the connection with that band, even though they're clearly...
Well, certainly First Temple means a lot to you. That is an album that you really connect with.
Yeah, and it was the same thing with Coheed, the one that they're playing that's got Welcome Home on it. That was the big one. I really connected with that. But I wasn't enough to push me over the edge of going and reading the comics and everything. And the overarching theme there being is you can't tell the consumer how to consume. You can't say, well, this is a concept thing. It has all these extra parts that
layers
go into it. And, if you read the comics, you'll get more out of the music. You lead a horse to water, can't make it drink, that kind of stuff.
But they are all these beautiful extras and extra layers that you can delve into if you want to.
Yeah. And so what I wanted to ask you was, like, have you read these comic books and, like, do you know the...
I haven't read the Amory Wars, no, but I certainly... am aware of the story. I worked in PR for the longest time, and I would get all of the press releases that would go into detail about how this plays into the next chapter of the Amory Wars.
Yeah.
And what I do love about that is that they also have had, like I said, they like to scratch that same niche fandom itch, in that they've made action figures of these characters that are in these comic books, and this is what has surprised me, is that there's just so many chapters of this story that has been ongoing. It surprises me so much that the Amory Wars hasn't been optioned for a Netflix or Amazon or whatever series, because it's so rich and so deep.
Well, I think that I remember seeing a while ago, because I did dig into this a few years ago, that there was someone had the rights are out there to purchase, and I think someone actually had optioned them for a period of time.
Yeah,
and it just
as all of
didn't
these
happen.
things,
it all goes into
as all of
development
these
hell.
things go. Yeah, there was a similar thing that happened called there was a show. There was a real mania for superhero type series when things like The Boys came out and Invincible and that sort of stuff, and Marvel was at its peak. There was a real grab by a bunch of different, all of the different
Preacher.
Seth
Rogen, Evan Goldberg made Preacher.
Yeah, well, they made Invincible as well. They're the producer
course.
behind Invincible. And so there was a real land grab for all of these types of properties. And there's a particular comic book writer called Mark Miller, and he has been responsible for some really, really iconic characters and series over the years. And they made one called Jupiter
Ascending.
Yeah, Jupiter Ascending.
Bombed pretty hard at the
and
box
it bombed
office.
really hard, and I think that's really slowed. And so obviously Umbrella Academy, which is attached to Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance, but isn't at all associated with My Chemical Romance.
Well, it's another good point, actually. The My Chemical Romance album, so there was the one, I can't remember what it's called, but the one before Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, then Three Cheers, which had I'm Not Okay, and it was the one that everyone will know.
Yep, and then Welcome to the Black Parade.
Welcome to the Black Parade. They were all concept albums.
That's
and it was a trilogy that they had planned on. They got to the fourth album, the one that
comes from that nerdy comic book thing that Gerard Way
has. And it only
has,
goes to prove the point as well that we're out of bourbon. I just saw you.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I could use a drink
this afternoon.
I could use a drink.
Bourbons. Yeah. We're talking about comic books. I could use a drink. Oh, Jesus. And a cigarette. So, not yet.
I can't go home with smoke on my breath.
It just goes to show that I saw an interview with him where he was talking about, look, we signed up for 4 albums because that was the record contract, but we only had 3. We wanted to make this trilogy of albums, and My Chemical Romance was only ever supposed to be a 3-album band and then disband. Like they literally, it started more as like a theatre project than a music project.
That checks out so hard with Gerard Way.
Yeah, so the 4th album, while it was still like, it was a cool, like they picked a theme for it and everything, and they did their best with it. And I think it's an okay album, but it feels different to everything they'd done before because they were locked into the contract. They had to make the thing. Whereas Umbrella Academy is obviously Gerard Way getting to, like, here's another thing I made start to finish that I want to actualize. Coheed's really awesome at that as well. I mean, what's some other concept stuff that tickles your fancy?
Music-wise?
Yeah.
It's not a band that I follow their absolute every move, but I love following along with their lore. And I'll get into Sleep Token in a minute, but the one that I'm actually thinking of right now is
You
Ghost.
like Sleep Token?
Shit. So
Ghost, yes.
It's Ghost. I love some of their stuff, and other of their stuff I'm just like, that's pretty bog standard stuff.
Yeah.
But I love the theatricality of it, and I love the lore that they've built around the progression of the front man and the Tobias Forge playing these characters of, I don't even know what character he's up to now, but he's had the different Papa Emeritus
right
over, and then it's become Pope Emeritus, and all of this stuff, and I love the theatricality, and it doesn't even happen at big shows. Sometimes the transition from one character to the next will happen at a little club show and stuff like that. There's one I remember watching. There was one, and each time he kind of regenerates into the next character, or that the new singer takes over. New singer. It will be it'll be mid-show, and he'll kill the other character and walk out as the next, and stuff like that. I remember watching a video of, there's one where he was this old decrepit pope sort of character, like sort of crooked pope, and then he comes out and he dies on stage and then comes out as the new, the one that's got the little pencil mustache.
Yeah.
He comes out as that and takes over as I'm the new singer of Ghost.
Again, with concept albums, there's like three kinds of concept album bands, I think. There's the bands that are musicians that want a concept to hang their music on.
Yep.
There's ones that are really like writers when it comes to, obviously like Gerard Way and like with Coheed as well. They're writing stories and they've got music to accompany it.
Yeah.
And then there's the ones that are just straight up trying to make theatre.
Yeah.
And Ghost is just one of those theatre bands, right?
Yeah. And I think the second that you accept that as just high camp, it's so much more enjoyable rather than trying to take it seriously as any kind of like, if you're trying to take it seriously as metal.
Yeah.
Of course it's quite light on in the actual genre. It's not very heavy. It's not very heavy at all.
Like
it can be really
rock.
naff. Yeah, exactly. And I think the more that you don't take it seriously as metal, and you look at it as high camp, almost parody, the more enjoyable it is, and you just laugh.
Yeah,
you just think, oh my god, this is so funny. But the musicians are incredible. I'm not going to take that away, but
you can't have a band like that without incredible musicians because you've got to be rock solid with it.
Which also brings up Steel Panther.
Yeah.
And that is high concept camp as well. It's just unfortunate that some of the people that follow it don't understand that it is parody and take that as very misogynistic and approval of a certain kind of lifestyle. And no.
I will say, so talking about the crossover between like music and theatre though is like, obviously musical theatre, but like more the fact of, writing music for theatre. Went to Dracula's recently.
Oh, I love Dracula's.
So
just ridiculous high camp.
So, I imagine most of the people that are listening to this live in Brisbane and know us personally at the moment. But if you happen to be listening to this and you don't live in Brisbane or Queensland or Australia, Dracula's Cabaret is a show on the Gold Coast. It used to be a franchise all around Australia, but I think Gold Coast is the only one left.
Remains,
And you go there and it's a very spooky, it's Halloween this week. It's appropriate.
Would have done a big trade this week.
Massive trade this week. And I went there for someone's birthday party recently, never been. And the thing that struck me about it was there was a guitarist and a drummer who a lot of the songs...
The musos are fantastic.
The musos are fantastic. They've got like acrobats that do,
aerials and silks and
all kinds of crazy acrobatic stuff. But the shows are made by these two musicians. Obviously, like just the music and the theming of the whole thing. So a lot of them are covers of songs, but they've made them gothic and everything. But those musicians also, in between acts, would come out and do like a funny, like, we're cleaning up the stage skit or whatever. So these guys could not only play music, but they could also, like, the guitarist was a great singer. They could dance. They could act. They could do all of these things. And I feel like those are the kind of people that end up going like, okay, we're doing this like local thing. It's going pretty well. But like, what if we started Ghost? I imagine those kind of bands come from those backgrounds where they're like, we could just do what we were doing at local black box theatre and just make it stadium approved.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And then moving on to Sleep Token, I think that is just one of the most high concept bands in the world, to the point where, and I know the identity of Vessel is not completely unknown anymore. I think if you know, you know.
Yeah.
But the fact that they have kept and made their fan base keep the secret as well, almost unspoken.
Imagine how enormous this band would have been before the internet.
Yeah. Well, it would have sparked that same... Okay, do you remember... Okay, two things from the 90s or early 2000s that circulated on pure speculation, pre-internet or early internet, where it wasn't easy to find verified facts. Two things. There's one, I don't know if you ever heard this one, about Slipknot, because remember early days no one knew who was in Slipknot?
Again, it's like when you watch movies where the problem in the movie is that they don't have a cell phone. They don't have a phone, so they're just like, oh, this thing's happening, and like this is the whole plot hinges on the fact that no one has a mobile phone.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with masked bands.
Yeah.
The whole thing hinges on the fact that you only get to see the band on the stage, and then they leave, and there's no behind the scenes of the band.
Did you ever hear the rumor back in the day that the reason why Slipknot wore masks and bashed each other on stage and did all of that sort of stuff was because they were doctors and lawyers and teachers and respectable jobs? You haven't heard that one? Okay.
That's great theory.
That was certainly one that circulated in the late 90s. And then the other one was around Marilyn Manson removing his ribs.
Yeah, of course.
In order to be able to auto-fellatio. Neither of them true.
Awesome PR, though.
Fantastic.
Incredible way to get people talking about you.
Exactly. And so, yeah, pre-internet, the vessel thing would have been just even more mysterious.
I don't know if I fully touched on this earlier, but the reason I brought up Closure in Moscow and the thing that I've always found interesting when it comes to marketing, like you used to do PR, like I'm very interested in the psychology of marketing and how you reach people with things. We both used to run gigs, right?
Yep.
And so in the mid sort of like 2000s, like early 2000s and 10s, you've got the internet, you've got MySpace, Facebook's just sort of come in, and you're trying to reach people. But by then, I'd stopped listening to the radio, watching free-to-air TV, reading newspapers, all of that stuff. So I used to think, if I'm running a gig, how do I reach me? If I'm the target audience, how do I find me and get me to come to the gig? With Closure, I found that after First Temple, the stuff that I heard after that I didn't really like, and so I didn't kind of keep going back to find new music of theirs. And you said earlier to me before we started the pod that like, oh, the new stuff they did is really good, and I really feel like people should
Soft Hell is very, very good.
There we go. So like, and because you've recommended that to me, I will now make the effort to go and listen to it. But the thing that twigged me was you said, oh, people really need to give it a go.
Yeah.
And when it comes to all this concept stuff, when it comes to bands that like, oh, I like that song, and someone goes, oh, they've got comic books, have you read them? You're like, I don't know if I'll do that. It is not your job as the consumer to go and consume everything by everyone. There's too much stuff out there. It is the job of the band to make it something that is so undeniable and in your face that you're like, I'm missing out if I don't go and consume the extra, the new music or the extra stuff that they've put around their music and everything. And I liken it to the trademark issue that Google and Velcro and like all these and Band-Aid have had, where they would have to put out ad campaigns to tell people, hey, not everything is Velcro. If you buy something that is like home brand Velcro, it's hook and loop. But if you call it Velcro and everything that goes and rips and fastens things, if you call everything Velcro, then it's become a common use term for hook and loop.
Yeah.
And then we lose the trademark on our brand. Same thing with Band-Aids. Not everything is a Band-Aid. They're a plaster or whatever. But they had to really go out and attack everyone with this like campaign of like, you need to know this so that we don't get fucked. I feel the same thing about music. Oh, this music's great, but there's comic books and you really need to read the comic books to understand the music. It's like, well, yeah, you can say that, but like, I don't really care. So make me care.
Is this then... Let me just throw this philosophical thing out there. Is this then the same problem around Marvel and their movies versus their TV shows? Do you need to watch the Marvel TV shows to appreciate the Marvel movies? Because there's a ton of stuff, detail, or is it that the general audience doesn't care beyond what they're going to see at the cinema? They're not going to spend their time digging down on watching Miss Marvel to enjoy the Marvels.
That's exactly right. And so we love music. That's why we're doing this. And we worked out that it's like, well, that's kind of like what we're doing. We're one of a very tiny, tiny piece of the puzzle of like when a band has put something out and they're trying to get everyone to consume the whole package. They've put all this effort in. 12 Foot Ninja did it as well.
12 Foot, I was going to talk about that because, I worked PR for the last album that they did that also came with 3 other things as well as the album.
Yeah.
It came with a video game.
Yes.
That they programmed themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say Stevic exclusively.
Yeah.
Probably would have done that. There was a comic book and there was a novel that was about that thick.
Yes.
The Wyvern and the Wolf.
Yeah.
Which I read cover to cover.
Yeah.
Would
have been about 600 pages or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About that. It was massive.
Yeah.
And it was a slog, probably more, frankly. It was 35 chapters or something. Mm. And some of them were a page and some of them were about 100 pages per chapter.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like, and it was one of those things that reading the book is what got me the work, because it was, you must understand this before you work it.
Yeah.
And that was an incredible experience, but it was one of those things that each of those things has its own audience outside just enjoying the music.
Yes, yeah.
And
someone might have picked that book up
and loved that and gave no shits for the
music. About the music, or also been a fantasy nerd and not been into heavy stuff and then put it on and went, this isn't for me at all.
Yeah, that's 100%.
Yeah.
And it's the concept, and it was so loosely connected as well.
Yeah.
It was just a few tiny tissue connections.
Whereas, so the other band we're seeing today is Periphery.
Yep.
So Periphery, I think it was 2015, they brought out the Juggernaut Alpha and Omega as a 2-disc set. 2-disc, I mean, it was no one bought the CD, but
2-volume collection.
2-volume collections. There's about 10 songs or maybe 8 songs on each CD. Again, not CDs.
Who's this guy living in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I'm making a podcast about trying to be up to date and modern, and I'm still thinking in CD terms.
I will say, just before we move on, this will come out after, or it may or may not. Don't listen, Truck. We went to, I won't talk about what band it is actually. We went to buy a present for our friend Truck. We were all group of us, all of his friends, went to buy certain bands' catalogue on vinyl for him, and we each listed out what album we were going to buy, and I thought I found an absolute bargain, Doug, on vinyl, and I went, that album for $11 free shipping.
Yeah.
You bet your ass I'm buying that. $11. Doesn't matter about what it costs. The point is the thought, right? It's brand new. How excellent. And it said disc number, blah, blah, blah. I thought, okay, yep. And I bought it, and something just nagged at me. I went, $11 the price isn't right. Nagged, and it didn't say
Larry Emdo would be so disappointed.
The format wasn't listed.
Yeah.
And I went, I bet that's a CD, eh?
Yeah.
So I went and bought it on vinyl again.
Just in case. And so
Resist Records in Sydney, thank you very much for sending the correct thing.
Love you.
And then the other one turned, I'm like, sure enough, it was a CD. I was like, oh, that was lucky.
You're great. What am I going to do with this?
Yeah. And that's it. I'm almost thinking about just putting the CD in with it as well. Yep. Being like, you got a baby one and a big one.
Yeah.
And a daddy one.
Yeah.
Because I like, put it in your car. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
But
does your car still have a CD player? Mine does.
Mine does. But I don't use it.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Good God.
Good Lord, man.
Wait. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about the Periphery album was, so I went to Mark Holcomb's guitar clinic a few days ago, and he talked about how they did that 2-album thing, and they actually storyboarded the album before they recorded it. So before they wrote it, with all the music for it, so they storyboarded it, so they knew exactly what the story was going to be, and then they wrote.
It does mean you can't cut anything without significantly. Like if you got to make damn sure those songs are the ones you want. You can't go recording a bunch and then being like, oh, we got to cut that one. Well, no,
it wasn't like that. It was that they storyboarded the story. They went through and they went, okay, over 16 tracks, these will be like each song will be about a particular thing, and then they went and wrote the music to the theme of each chapter, right? So they chaptered it out.
Oh, right. So you didn't actually have excess tracks.
No. So they would have already had riffs and things like that. But the idea was that they went, okay, each song is going to be about this and it will have this vibe. And we know that some songs are going to have like epilogue sort of bits to them. So like there was the first single they put out called The Scourge. And it was like a bit of a low tempo, not a super heavy song. But then at the end, there's this weird like electronic refrain at the end of it that is kind of leads into the next song after that. So I find it really interesting when a band... They also never released what the story was until like a year later. So they went, this is a concept album. We wrote all the music and all the lyrics and everything. It is a story, but we refuse to say what the story's about.
Thematically, could you tell when you listen to it? You're sort of like, I get what this is kind of about.
Yeah, it was vaguely a story about like a cult and like, so, you know, a character that realizes they're in a cult and they try to get out of the cult. So you could kind of pick up on it. But the interesting part was that they went, we want the audience to sit with it and work out, you know, remember before the internet when you could just find out whatever you want about anything, fucking whenever? We're going to put it out and, you know, you can read the lyrics and everything, but like we're not going to explicitly say what the story's about. And then like a year later or so, that once people had time to sit with it, then they went and they kind of clarified what it is. And so it gave people time to actually experience the media, but because it wasn't explicit, like each song was explicitly like, and now this is happening, it lets people enjoy the music. If they want to dig in more, they can, but there's no extra reading required. And I think that is interesting because I feel the same about Coheed. I don't feel like there's extra reading required for that.
Yeah.
But then you could have a band where they lean so hard into the musical theatre aspect of it, like the Ghost thing. I'd be super confused if I didn't know anything about Ghost and I went along and then there's like a bit where he kills his character off and in the stage show. None of that comes through.
That doesn't happen at all the shows either. That just happens one show. If you're lucky enough to be there,
exactly,
you're there.
Yeah,
and then it moves on, and he's a whole new character now.
Yeah.
So
we're coming up on we're about 34 minutes. So what would you say if you had to say like top 3 like concept sort of albums or bands that you would recommend? Like what's your
the newer
of newer, but just in general, it's like even something that someone might not have heard of, or
I mean, I know Sleep Token is certainly one that's become really ubiquitous and has become incredibly popular and in a lot of people's faces.
Yeah.
So that one is one. If you haven't checked them out yet, they're 3 albums deep now. Each single one is quite siloed in their concept, but all the way through is this story of that vessel is literally a vessel for the message of the god sleep.
Yep.
And the songs are the psalms, I guess, of that particular, the messages that the god is giving to the world.
Okay.
And each particular one has all sorts of hidden messages in the lyrics and in, you know, I've got the vinyl for all 3, and each one has all sorts of different hidden messages in the liner notes and things like that. The second album, if you go through the pages of the book, they have latitude and longitudes just listed randomly throughout the.
Okay.
And if you look them up, they're all the locations of mysterious sunken ships or submarines or just mysterious locations in the ocean and things like that. It's pretty out there.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Easter eggs.
Yeah, and it's all pretty cool. But yeah, the overarching concept is that vessel is this sort of, but he's like, almost like a mischievous demigod almost as well. If you watch him on stage, he sort of prances about and does weird shit and, you know, kisses all of the other members of the band. And, you know, he's not as scary and spooky as it all looks. He's kind of a bit of a Loki type character. He's a bit mischievous. He's got a cheeky side to him.
Yeah.
All of that sort of stuff. But the point is that no one knows the identity of each of the members of the band. The rest of the band are numbered as well. They don't have names.
Must get exhausting.
It's an incredibly well kept and oiled machine, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously, Welcome to the Black Parade, I think, is one of my more favourite of the concept albums as well.
Absolutely.
That's just I just remember when that came out, a friend of mine, Ben Wilson, told me about. I remember the moment as well. I was in shopping fair, Woolworths. I ran into Ben Wilson and he told me about it. He was in a band called The Shortfall.
Yep.
And they were going on a tour that Craig Zonka, ABC radio presenter in Brisbane,
we love that Craig.
He managed that band at that time, and he had got a RADF grant for them to tour from Rockhampton North all the way up to Cairns.
Yep.
And they were about to leave, and so he was doing the shop for all of the stuff to take in the van on the tour, and I ran into him there, and he told me, it was like, oh my God, we've been listening to this, you know, Welcome to the Black Parade album nonstop, and, you know, here's what it's all about. And I went away and listened to it then and just went like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's so...
And that's all they listened to in that van, that whole tour. They just, it got to the end of the CD and they went back to the start.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's one that has a lot of meaning to me. And, I think the ghost thing has been the one that's been most intriguing to me in the last few years.
Right.
Not that I've dug heap into the lore, but I love how much they're just dedicated to the whole thing, and it's exploded in such a big way. The time where I saw them was at Download Festival, and there's plenty of people there, but I just thought, oh yeah, they, you know, I didn't realize they had such and the next time they were out, they were playing arenas.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And the show that people talked about being one of the best they'd ever seen in terms of arena shows. And
well, the number one thing that someone asked Mark Holcomb's, like, how do you stand out in such a noisy marketplace of music now? And he's like, your live show's got to be undeniable. It's just like, you know, your music can be okay, but like people might not find your music or whatever like that. But like if you're playing a show and someone's never heard of you and you're just on the lineup, like you need to be the band that they talk about afterwards. Even if they don't go listen to your music, they just need to be you need to be the name on their lips afterwards, where they went, I went for this band, but really this other band, they were the ones that like just were incredible.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole pod on that.
On live shows,
that you didn't go to see, but you caught and it converted you.
Oh, I've got so many.
Yeah, we could do that for sure.
Yeah.
Which briefly I want to just touch on. I think the ambitiousness of a live show that Parkway Drive just did for this tour, just going, now I wasn't there, but obviously I saw all of everything. They reached Sydney and Melbourne. They didn't quite hit because
they cocked it up.
They
cocked it up so bad.
They did, but my God, like the ambitiousness to attempt, just incredible.
Yeah.
To be the live show that everyone talks about.
Oh yeah, they nailed the live show. Yeah. They fumbled the whole. There shouldn't have been
the logistics of it.
Yeah, the logistics are the hardest part as well. Like that's the part that no one really wants to think about is like how hard it's going to be to orchestrate the actual physical side of
versus
like
the cost,
transporting everything, setting it all up, all of the shit. You know, you can go and play the show with or without the gear.
Yeah.
But like to get the gear is
Well, it's one of those things. They could have spread it out. They could have done a capital city per weekend over 4 weekends or something. But then the cost, the expanse of the cost.
Yeah, especially when you've got like, you know, Ghost Inside come over from America. They're not going to come and hang out for 3 weeks.
Months.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so my concept albums, just quickly, if you're out there and you, like, they're not necessarily new bands, but they're bands that you might not have heard of and that it's worth going and checking out. Because, I mean, a lot of the stuff I listen to were bands that were not huge at the time, but they've become sort of infamous, and I found them through that.
Yep.
And I would number one, top of my pile for a concept album. There's a band called Boys Night Out. They're still active now.
Okay.
But Boys Night Out had an album called Trainwreck, and it is a 12-song album that is about a guy who has he's having like manic episodes like in his sleep, and he in the first couple songs he has a dream where he wakes up from the dream and he's strangled his wife with a telephone cord. And so, of course, the cops come.
We don't condone
No,
family
obviously
violence,
not.
my God.
It's a dark story. It's a very dark story. But the story is about the fact that he is in love, like he's madly in love with his wife, and they're inseparable, and they're like he's just so happy. But he has this really horrible dream one night about doing that. And he wakes up and realizes that he has done that. And his world's upside down because he's like, this wasn't me.
Yeah,
but like I've woken up.
But it also was me.
But it was me. And so then the story goes on about the fact that, the cops show up and he goes to trial and he gets declared insane and he goes...
What's the name of the album again?
It's called Trainwreck.
Right.
He gets declared insane but then he managed to convince the doctors to like let him out and go home. And he goes through this whole crazy thing of like trying to cleanse himself of the thing that he's done because he's done this horrible thing.
Oh my God.
And it's the story is really heavy, but it's kind of like it's like a it's not pop punk, but it's this like sort of post-hardcore. It's very like rock sing-along. It's a Canadian band that they have like the regular 5-piece band, but piano as well. And there's this really cool rock opera sort of thing going on that you wouldn't pick up on unless you're really listening to it. And that blew me away.
And in order as well.
And like I listen to this thing like every
which is another
few
thing to
months,
talk
start
about
to
in this
finish.
is that that's not necessarily how people consume anymore either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The songs on there are all great on their own, but to listen to it in order, you really you actually get once you know the story, it's impossible to not get immersed in the story while you're listening to it.
Yeah.
And that is an interesting thing for a concept album, I think, is to actually get sucked into the story and listen to it like you're watching a movie.
I agree. So I actually have one more to add to that.
Yeah.
I don't want to take away from your other two.
I don't really need to give any others.
Fantastic
That's
entry.
just my number one. If like there's not enough streams on that on anything I've seen, I feel like not enough people have heard about it.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor and go and have a listen to it. It is hands down my favorite.
So you triggered a memory of mine as well. And it's not a new album by any stretch of the imagination. I think it came out in 2000 or 2001. It's a guy called Michael Franti.
Yeah.
And Spearhead was his band.
Yep.
And for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the album. I'll look it up in a sec. But actually, why don't I do that now while I'm talking about it? So it's basically the concept is that it's a radio station and it's set in like a small South American country.
Yep.
Where there's a revolution going on and it's an election night.
Right.
So there's a like a dictator that is incumbent that's still in.
Yep.
And obviously there's someone that's running against it. And this it's like a rebel radio station.
Right.
And basically you've got these two presenters, a man and a woman, who are talking during the intermission tracks. And there's another lost art.
Yeah.
The intermission tracks. And it is called Yell Fire. No. Is it Yell Fire?
Jamie, pull that up.
What the hell? No, Yell Fire is the one after it.
See, this also sounds to me a lot like what was it? Songs of the Deaf.
Yeah, it's a bit like
Stone
that.
Age, of it being a radio station. Because like is it Songs for the Deaf that has No One
Yes.
Knows on it?
Yeah.
And
It's a Mexican radio station.
Years and years, I had no idea that it was a concept album,
Yeah.
and that the concept is it's the drive from like LA out to
Joshua Tree, probably, yeah.
Yeah. And so as you get out, things get more and more sort of deserty vibe. You start out with like the radio rock of the city, and then it slowly gets more and more sort of like late night somber. Yeah.
So, and as the record goes on, obviously they're talking more and more about the election and that it's election night, so it's being counted as they go.
Yeah.
And they're very the politics obviously of the radio station is very anti-fascist, anti right wing, and all of that sort of stuff. And the album finishes with the album. So the penultimate track is they find out that that their candidate lost the election, and that the incumbent autocrat has got back in.
Yeah.
And so it's a real somber vibe, and they have like a real slow song. And then after that, they play sort of a fuck you type song.
Yeah.
And then the album finishes with the authorities kicking the door down and arresting everyone.
Yeah,
and
right.
shutting the radio station down.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's an amazing record.
It just goes to show too that now in a culture where singles are very, like it used to be, obviously there was always singles on albums, but now there's very much a
very roots rock reggae.
Yeah.
record.
No, I mean like just the streaming culture of putting out lots of singles and stuff. Albums, concept albums are slowly dying, I feel like, unless your whole band is a concept, like Coheed, for example. They could just be putting out 3 songs like EPs if they wanted even, and still be able to carry the concept.
Correct.
Because they've branded themselves that way. But like I could go and write a 10-song concept album, but it's going to be way harder to market that now than it used to be, because people want to playlist stuff, and when you playlist things, you lose
context.
Context. So, look, I think we've reached
We've exceeded our mission
time
here
limit
tonight.
Yeah, there's no possible way we're ever going to hit 30 minutes. I feel like the next time we hit 30 minutes and we stop, we've had a bad topic.
Too true. I will say keep the suggestions and everything going.
Absolutely.
Of ideas and everything. I know we don't necessarily jump into them every time we do something, but the more that we get, the more it sparks new ideas for us.
I think maybe next time we'll do one of the suggestions, and we'll try to throw one of those in a month.
Yeah.
Yep.
I definitely want to shout out Joel, who's been just throwing ideas at us left, right, and centre.
We love our Joel. Yeah. Joel's also the legend who did, when we used to do Tune Flick Chat, he drew our green couch that we used to sit on as well. And yeah, Joel's a legend.
It was fantastic the other day. I just want to give a little peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
I did like an anonymous question thing, and people were sending in suggestions.
Yeah.
And he sent one in, and the answer I gave, I then put, just to acknowledge, I'm letting everyone know who it was. If you know kind of thing. I put Mordecai in there as the the song for it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I see you, man.
You've done very well. Yeah.
Right. Peace.
I think we're out. Love you. See you next time. Bye.